Hello there. Today we are using reading strategies to get through tough, challenging, advanced, old texts. So, hello there. My name is Mr. White, and I've heard that you've been having some trouble with getting through difficult texts in school. And we're getting to the point in school where there's a lot of old primary documents or advanced texts, and it can be really difficult to understand what the heck the writer is trying to tell us. So I wanted to show you some strategies today that can help you out. I'm going to talk about the first 3 of 6 reading strategies we can use to understand difficult texts. If you want to learn about the second 3, those are going to be available to you in the notes connected to the video. So first things first, we have to read the text. This gives us a basic understanding of the overall piece that we can then use to harvest for clues, context, anything that can help us to understand the more precise meaning of the text. This is our passage. This is from chapter 1 of Frederick Douglass's Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. We're going to go ahead and just read through it now. My father was a white man. He was admitted to be such by all I ever heard speak of my parentage. The opinion was also whispered that my master was my father, but of the correctness of this opinion, I know nothing. The means of knowing was withheld from me. My mother and I were separated when I was but an infant, before I knew her as my mother. It is a common custom in the part of Maryland from which I ran away to part children from their mothers at a very early age. Frequently, before the child has reached its 12th month, its mother is taken from it and hired out on some farm a considerable distance off, and the child is placed under the care of an old woman, too old for field labor. For what this separation has done, I do not know, unless it be to hinder the development of the child's affection toward his mother, and to blunt and destroy the natural affection of the mother for the child. This is the inevitable result. Okay, so now that we've read through it, you've probably noticed some words that we don't know, that are very confusing, that are mysterious to us. So we've got to use context clues to figure out those tough words. And all this means is using all of the other words and pieces of the words themselves that are confusing to figure out what exactly that confusing word means. So we're using all of the evidence from the text, all of the words, phrases, sentences around it to figure out what it means. Now we do this using a 5-step process. First, we figure out the part of speech. Second, we figure out the charge. Third, we look at the word parts, the suffixes, the roots, the prefixes. Then we hunt for our context clues. And then finally, at the very end of all of this, then we substitute the words. We don't do that first because otherwise we can set ourselves up for some huge mistakes. So we're going to go through these. We got 4 here. The red arrows indicate the context clues that I'll be referencing. And let's just talk about this process for each of these words. So first, for parentage. Well, I know it's a noun, my parentage, but the charge, it seems neutral to positive maybe. It's hard to really tell given the context in this part. Sometimes you'll have it, sometimes you won't. So we're going to move on to word parts. We see parent and age. So parent is clearly related to the ideas of parents, your mom, your dad, whatever. But the suffix age refers to relationships. So whatever parentage means, it has something to do with the relationship of parents or the relationship to parents. Now I'm going to look around for my context clues. And first of all, I see the fact that whatever parentage is, it's related directly to Frederick Douglass's father. We see that a couple of times. But it's also related to the correctness of this opinion, it says. So whatever parentage is, it has to do with an opinion about his father. Something with the parent relationship, an opinion about that. So I'm going to try and put that together as best I can. I'm going to come up with a noun or two. And I think I might try and use heritage or ancestry to replace that with. They're both nouns. They both fit based on the whole breakdown of the word in our context clues. Next, we have the word custom. So again, custom is a noun. We see that because it comes after a adjective and the word a. Again, the charge is kind of difficult to tell. I'm going to say neutral. Doesn't really seem to be strongly charged. And as for the word parts, I really have no clue with this one. Now, even though I have no clue, it was important for me to stop and check and try and find them. So moving on then, I'm looking for context clues. Well, it comes after the word common and before the word frequently. So I'm trying to be really simple here. So I might say something like occurrence, which is also a noun, because that would make sense after those other words and around those other words. Next, we have the word affection. So affection is a noun, and this time I can tell it has a positive charge because it's talking about the feelings that a child has for its mother, a mother has for its child. So affection seems in general, even though this situation is kind of ugly, affection seems like it has a positive charge. And when I break down the word, I get affect and ion. What that means is a condition. So it's got to be some kind of state, some kind of condition, some kind of feeling. If I'm looking for my context clues there, I see the word natural. So this affection is something that children, babies, and mothers naturally feel for each other. So what do I think that means? Well, I think that means a feeling of love or a feeling of care, both of which are nouns, so they would work there. Finally, we have the word blunt. Now, blunt is a verb. It's an action. And this seems like a negative word. It's around all of these other negative words. The overall context of doing this to this innocent child seems very, very negative. As for the word parts, though, again, I'm kind of confused. I don't really know anything about them. So I've got to go ahead and begin looking for my clues. And I see right after that word blunt, the word destroy. So those are being packaged together. So they're synonyms. And it also comes after hinder, describing the same thing happening in the other direction. So it's got to be related to hindering and destroying. So I said stop or hurt. I replace my words. And yeah, everything really seems to make sense. Speak of my ancestry. It is a common occurrence. It hinders the development of the child's love toward his mother, and it stops and destroys the natural affection. All right, this makes a lot more sense. Let's move on to our next step. So we're paraphrasing important bits. Now, what paraphrasing means is to take a piece of text in difficult, confusing language and to put it into your own words. We do this using a 4-step process of reword, meaning changing as many words as possible, rearranging, meaning reorganizing the sentences and ideas so they become more of your own, realizing, meaning stopping to recognize which words have to stay the same, which information has to be expressed in the exact same way, and then finally, recheck. That's making sure that all of the original ideas are in that paraphrase. So we've got 2 texts. Feel free to pause this video to get a better idea of those. Now, for my overall first paraphrase, I look over this and this is what I came up with. Every person Douglas ever spoke to about his parents told him that his father was Caucasian. Some suggested his, quote, owner was his dad, but Douglas was prevented from ever confirming that. If I'm using my 4 R's, I check over and realize, yeah, I've changed most of the words, as many of them as I could, in order to make it sound more like my voice. I've also mixed up the sentences and the order of ideas. This again makes it feel more like you speaking, which makes you have more ownership of it, which allows you to memorize and utilize this information more effectively. For my my realize, I've kept a couple of words the same, specifically Douglas, because without discussing Douglas, really, what am I doing here? And then finally, I've made sure all of the original ideas are in that paraphrase. Same thing for my second paraphrase here. Children are often taken from their mothers before they turn 1. The kids are given to older women who cannot do manual labor, and the mothers are sent to work far away from their children. It seems like one of the reasons for doing this is to make the parents and the children have no feelings for one another, as that very thing always happens. Again, I've reworded as much as I can. I've reorganized an awful lot of this. I have realized that some words might be too simple to change, although in this case we were able to get a lot of them changed. And then I've made sure that all of the original ideas are in that paraphrase. Now we've got to figure out the central idea. Central idea is the single most important idea that the writer needs you to understand when you leave the text. And we find this by following a three-step process. First, figuring out the topic of the passage. 2, finding some key details related to the topic. And then 3, putting it all together in 1 to 2 sentences, what tells us what the passage is saying about the topic. So first of all, our topic. All the ideas seem to be connected to slave children and their parents. So when you come up with your topic, remember it should be one word or a phrase or a small chunk of a sentence, never a complete sentence. I come up with slave children and their parents. So now I have to hunt down all of the key details related to slave children and their parents. So we've got the fact that Frederick Douglass's father was a white man, that he was probably also his master, that it was very common for children to be taken from their parents, and that the reason for this seemed to be to make the kids and the parents not really feel anything for each other. What I have to do now is take all of those ideas and my topic and mix them together into a statement which will tell us what the writer is trying to tell us about slave children and their parents. And so what I've ultimately come up with was slave children were routinely prevented from having meaningful contact and relationships with their parents. I feel that this is the idea that Frederick Douglass wants us to walk away from this passage with the most. So in terms of determining tone, okay, we've got some good stuff for you. Make sure to check the notes because we won't have time here. Got a little preview of that. Same thing with summary. Make sure to check the notes attached to this to get an idea of how to put together this summary. You see I've highlighted our who, what, when, where, why, how information in there. And then finally, figurative language. So there's no figurative language in the actual passage. So I've given you some extra stuff to work with in our notes. Make sure you check those out. Now finally, look at this nice soothing scene here. This is really relaxing me so we can reflect effectively. As you're doing this, you're going to need to slow down. You have to slow down so you can understand what you're getting yourself into. And that's going to allow you to see stuff you never saw before in the text. You also have to use your head. You're smart. So use the knowledge that you already have. Think about how you would feel in these situations. Okay? Use your head. You have to think through this. It's not some magic formula. And finally, don't get frustrated. This is not a perfect science. It's going to be messy, and that's okay. Make sure that you allow yourself to make some mistakes and practice, practice, practice. All right. Good luck. Bye-bye.